What's up, guys? Eric here from Marked and Made. Sorry, I don't feel like being on camera today. So, what we're going to do is go through how I made these big signs for our store and the process and how we nested all the stuff to make the most out of material using the OneLaser Hydra 16. So, without further ado, I'll jump right into it, starting with the design. All right, so designing these was actually my wife's work, well, most of it. So I'll walk you through some of the tips and tricks, but it should be pretty straightforward, right? My wife Ashley is more familiar with Xtool Suite and Xtool Creative Space, or Xtool Studio and Xtool Creative Space, than pretty much any other design software because she didn't really get into designing until we started the store. So she designed what she wanted inside of XCS, and then I brought it into Xtool Studio. And then this is what we came up with. So we're going to end up with 4 signs to put around the store. Each of them are going to be pretty large. She didn't know exactly how big she wanted them, but she went ahead and made, a pretty decent size. So I think like this is probably the biggest one. How big is that? Didn't mean to drag that there. Um, this biggest one is 622 millimeters wide and 123 tall. So not near big enough for what we want, but it gets us started. So what I did was I exported all of these as an SVG and then brought them over into Lightburn because we're going to be cutting them on the OneLaser Hydra 16, and Lightburn is what we're going to use to actually send this job to the laser. So first thing I did was scale them up. You can see now this biggest one here is, if I were to grab it all, we'll grab from the right side, and it's actually, we've scaled this up to where it's 1500 millimeters wide and just shy of 300 millimeters tall. So we're coming in around 5 feet for this, for the width of this longest one, and that's what we're going to cut out of. And then the blue lines are score. Now, just to give you some details on the Hydra 16 from OneLaser, it is a 1600 millimeter wide by 1000 millimeter deep, or high, depending on how you look at it, work area. And so it's very large. And then we're actually, the engrave and score set, or the score and cut settings on this were ridiculous. It's 150-watt CO2 and a 38-watt RF. So knowing that, we're going to set our score to 20 power, 100 speed, and we set our cut to 90 power and 30 speed. Both are going to use that CO2 laser just because there's no point in switching lasers for a quick score, though we probably could do it on the RF. It's just easier to do it on the CO2. So we went ahead and processed that job, and we were able to fit 3 of these on one of those sheets of plywood that we cut down. So the plywood we got from Home Depot, it was about, uh, a standard plywood sheet, so it's 8 by 4 foot. We ended up cutting off 8 inches off the bottom because we only have about 40 inches on the honeycomb to work with for depth. So we cut off 8 on the short side, and then we cut it at, I think, just over 5. I think we might have cut it at 5 foot. So we had a 5 foot and a 3 foot piece. We actually cut 2 pieces. So 2 5 foot pieces, 2 3 foot pieces, both of them 40 inches wide, and the scraps we cut in half just so we could fit them in the bed later in case we needed that. So yeah, that's how we did this. Once we cut them out, and I'll drop over into some footage of that now, of the actual cutting. So here's my wife holding one of the larger sheets. This is one of the 5 foot sections, so 5 foot by 40 inches. So absolutely massive laser bed. We threw that right in the Hydra 16, sent the job, and hit start. And we'll speed this up, but as you can see, it's going to go through the scoring and the cutting here in short order. And I can't speak highly enough about the OneLaser. So, quick info on that. And we actually did this in 2 jobs before I get into that. So, we did, as you remember, we could fit really 3 on one and then one on its own piece. So, we went ahead and did the one separately by itself just to make sure our settings were good. Our settings were great, it cut out just fine. The way the OneLaser works, the Hydra is probably the biggest laser we've ever owned. It weighed like 1,200 pounds. It was kind of a beast to get in, but once you get it in, it's an awesome machine. They do make smaller Hydras. All of them have a 38-watt RF, and they have different levels of the CO2 laser. So we happened to get the 16, so we upgraded to the 150-watt CO2, and that's what let us get through these crazy speeds. And funnily enough, actually, we processed the score at only 20% power and 100 speed. And we noticed after, when we stained them, that actually that score had gone partially almost through the wood in some spots because we had stain leaking through, and you could see some of the score marks on the back of the sheet. So even 20% power at 100 speed was probably a little too much power for the score on this. But again, it got through it pretty quickly. We're not complaining. It's not going to a customer, it's just going up on our wall. They ended up looking great. So after that, we processed the job here for all three of them, the three bigger ones on the second sheet. And again, that processed in no time at all either. So really enjoy working with OneLaser. The way they work is they have a 38-watt RF and then different levels of the CO2. Again, and it's actually on mirrors. So uh, if you want to use the RF, the mirrors pop up to show the RF laser. And if you want to use the CO2, the little elevator in the back drops the mirrors down so that it's lined up with the CO2 source. So really great tech there. As you can see here, just a quick video of us prepping the board for the letters. So we knew we were going to cut the letters out. We knew we didn't want to paint all those boards individually. We wanted them to be black and we wanted the backer to be stained. So I was working on painting both of these sheets. We ended up painting two, even though we only needed one. And then we'll jump into how we actually design that. And now we have a whole extra sheet of black painted wood. We use black a lot, so that'll be great. And now let's jump into how we design the letters for the second part. So now that we've prepped the boards for the actual cutting out of the letters, because these were just score marks. Now we probably could have used a template for this, but we didn't because it was just too much wood to waste. So I didn't want to cut this out twice and waste, 10 more feet of wood essentially. So what we did instead was just scored on them, of course, as you saw in the first video. Now what we need to do is cut out of those 3-foot pieces the actual letters. So what we did is I drew a box essentially that was as wide as my wood was. So we were 1,000 wide by 900 millimeters tall, which is pretty close. And then we copied all of the letters over. And then I used a tool called SVGNest. So if you're familiar with SVGNest, what it allows you to do is drop everything in and then nest that into one shape. So quick overview of how you'll actually do that is you go ahead and select everything, and then you're going to export what you have selected into an SVG and choose where you're going to save it. I'm going to throw this in downloads just so I can get to it a little easier, and we're just going to call it nested letters. And then once that exports, you're going to come over to a browser and go to svgnest.com. Again, SVGNest is super easy to use. So essentially all you have to do is upload your SVG here. And then for some reason it didn't like that, even though it is an SVG. There it goes. Once you upload it, you're going to choose what the shape that you're nesting into is. So it says click the outline to use as the bin. That's going to be the square because that's the shape of our wood. And then you're going to change your settings to do whatever you want in terms of spacing. This is in millimeters. I ended up choosing 8 millimeters, and I ended up turning my curve tolerance, which just helps with like the S's and the things with lots of curves in them to make sure they don't overlap. I changed that to 0.2, but it is quite a bit slower when you lower that tolerance down. So I'm going to leave it at 0.3 just to give you an overview of what this looks like. And then we're going to save those settings and start that nest. Now, this does have to do a lot of rearranging. So sometimes this takes a minute or two to actually fully place this. So what I'll do is I'll pause this and I will come back when it's done nesting and we'll show you what it looks like. All right, perfect. So this is finished now, and it took about exactly 2 minutes to complete. Now, once you have this done, it'll keep re-nesting. So if you like the first result, make sure you click Stop Nest, or it's just going to continue to place those and cycle through nesting solutions until it thinks it finds something that you like. Now, you'll notice if we zoom in here, it's actually not going to let me because Chrome. There we go. So if we zoom in, we might have some overlap on some of these letters, but I won't really know until I get it into Lightburn. And that's again due to the curve tolerance. So the S's, the G's, those are all, it looks like we probably definitely will have some overlap on this S down here. That's all due to the curve tolerance. So if you drop that down, it's going to essentially tighten the tolerance for how closely or how much attention it pays to those curves and where exactly they are. So that's how you get around that, or you can just download it and then move them around within the SVG separately. But once you have that, you're going to download that SVG and you're going to bring that over straight into Lightburn. And then you can see here that we have our all of our letters here in the exact same size that we uploaded them, all of our little circle delineators, and then we have this box around it. This box is again the size of the wood, so we don't need that. So we click it and delete it. Not the whole thing though. I forgot I have grouping turned on, so we'll ungroup first and then we'll click it and delete it. Just that box. And then this we would all change to a cut layer because again, we're cutting these out. So we'll change it to red. The speed and power is already assigned. It's the same material, just this time it's painted black. And then once we cut those out, we will go ahead and apply them. But again, use SVGNest, guys, if you're doing a lot of nesting and you want to save some material. Wood is expensive. Quarter-inch wood, is like $25 a sheet right now. If you go to half-inch wood, which we do for some of our clients, 36-inch rounds, like for their door, for baby name signs or things like that, that's like $50 a sheet. So nest your things, save your space. Yeah, it's a little bit of work getting them back out and putting them in the right order. But these are big signs, right? We can tell where the letters go pretty easily. And since they're all the same size and we scaled them up together in the first one, instead of just making them all 5 feet long, if we would have went and made these all the same length, then it would have changed the font size. But since we selected them all and scaled them together up to the longest one being about 5 feet long, then the font size stayed the same. So it doesn't matter which A we pick out of here. If it's an A that's in the bottom in that second font, it's going to fit on any of the A's throughout here. So it's going to be easy to go ahead and reorganize these letters, and it's not going to be a big deal. We went ahead and cut this out, and I think it took like half an hour. I'll confirm that in the video, but I'm pretty sure this cut itself took like half an hour, which is actually really fast considering how big this is. This is 850 millimeters wide, 880 millimeters tall, and it's just a ton of small, intricate pieces that have to be cut. So cutting this on something like a slower 55-watt CO2 just would have taken, an hour and a half or so. But the power and speed of that 150-watt is just insane on the Hydra. So highly recommend the OneLaser Hydra. And let's get into the rest of the video. All right, so cutting this out, again, the laser took no time. It got through that whole cut job in like just under 30 minutes. So cutting out all those letters was definitely a lot, and it breezed through it fairly quickly. Once we had them cut out, we needed to get them attached, but we realized we didn't prep the backers beforehand. So what we did was just sand those down real quick and hit them with an air gun to get them prepped for sanding and get rid of some of the soot from the laser. It's probably the easiest way. So I just hit it with a hand sander. I didn't feel like breaking out the orbital and going outside and all that. So hit it with a hand sander, hit it with a little air gun, and then we had it prepped for sanding for staining. For the stain, we ended up using Varathane, and we used the early American color. For some reason, it's one of my wife's favorite colors. So as you can see, we kind of attacked this as a team. I did one, I put it on, she wiped it off, got through it fairly easily. And then we just had to attach the letters. I realized after the fact, though, that we didn't actually get any footage of the letters going on. So what we did was use just regular craft glue. I think we used what's the brand? Art Glitter, or maybe it was the other one, but I'm pretty sure it was Art Glitter glue. We use it all the time, and then got them done. So I do have some footage of them being done though. And as you can see, even these big signs look kind of small on our walls. So our store is just over 3,000 square feet. We've been consistently adding to the store since we opened in June. And it'll just be nice for our customers to be able to have some signage when they come in to kind of guide them around the store for what they're looking for. So as you can see, we have one sign for tumblers, one sign for our hat section, one sign for special occasions, and one sign for our home decor. And we think it's going to do a lot to really help our customers find their way around the store, and just brings a nice little pop of color there. So thanks again for watching, guys. If you have any questions about how we did this, or XCS tips, or tips with any of the lasers or equipment that we have, feel free to join our Facebook group, and also feel free to leave a comment on the video for what you'd like to see next. We are making some 36-inch signs here shortly, so we should have some videos coming on that. And yeah, thanks so much for joining in. Again, this is Eric with Marked and Made, and I'll leave comments to everything down in the description, so feel free to join our Facebook group there or ask questions here in the comments. Thanks again. Have a great one.